Had the races been flipped, there would have been war crimes tribunals called immediately, and the United Nations would have stepped in, the EU would have stepped in. There appeared to be some black youths involved. Appeared. It was very hard to find anybody else.
I don't want to live with these people. They're not the same as me. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's returning, and still amazing guest is Derek Domino, all the way from the Emerald Isle. How you doing, Derek?
Very, very well. Thanks for having me back on, Nick. Great to speak to you as always.
Always my pleasure. I contacted you yesterday evening because I've been seeing a video quite a lot yesterday, which was horrendous on different levels. So it's the video from Ireland of, it looked 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 black youths chasing one white youth, and then the white youth gets beaten to a pulp, basically. It looked horrendous. Now, I'm not sure what's going on, so hopefully you'll have more information on that than me. But it looked horrendous on several scales. First of all, there's the racial element there. When you're looking at a huge group of one race of people chasing one person of another race, that looks awful. If these races would have been reversed, if it had been 70 white people, Irish people, chasing one black person and beating them up, this would have been international news. Ireland would have been at risk of being bombed by NATO members for being such a racist piece of crap. But when you flip the races to the way they are, nothing. What went on?
Well, in a nutshell, this, as you say, it was an abhorrent act, an abhorrent situation, and it very definitely, as you again rightly say, had the races been flipped, there would have been war crimes tribunals called immediately, and the United Nations would have stepped in, the EU would have stepped in. It would have been a blanket coverage, TV, radio, the airwaves. It would have absolutely been everywhere. Now, as it turns out, this was a charity, as I understand it, a charity football match out in Adamstown. Now, Adamstown is a suburb. It's a suburb of Dublin, but it's a newly constructed suburb of Dublin near Lucan, and it was only there about 25 years. And because we here in Dublin, we can't build up. We've got height restrictions. That's why Dublin is a very flat city. So we build out. So as the population in the late 90s was starting to really increase with the Celtic Tiger, they obviously needed more accommodation, more houses, more housing estates, all of the facilities that go with that. So they built out and they created new towns, if you like, new areas. And Adamstown is one of those. And it has a large percentage of, shall we say, new to the parish people, foreign people, a lot of people of African heritage there, and various other groups. So it's kind of one of these, just newly made up places. Now, of course, when you just essentially build a place out of nothing and you construct it overnight, practically, it hasn't grown organically, as with most areas that you and I would know and would have been in and grown up in. So it's a hodgepodge, and things can go wrong very, very quickly. And what you saw on Sunday was this charity football game. And after the match, well, you saw the footage, I saw the footage. Essentially a feral pack mob of the vast majority that I could see were if not African, certainly of African heritage. They hunted down one Irish young fella, a teenager, probably mid-teens by the look of him. And it was like something you'd see in Mogadishu or one of the, Kinshasa or something like that, Haiti. You could see the kid, whoever filmed it. I showed the footage, and it's freely available on X if anybody wants to go looking for it. You could see the kid running for his life, and this feral mob, as I say, of vast majority were black youths. I would say teens, possibly 20s. They chased him like they were hunting a wild animal, and they caught him. And having caught him, they beat him to a pulp. They beat him unconscious and continued beating him, kicking him in the head. It was an absolutely vicious, ferocious attack by a mob. I know Africa has this thing called mob justice, and I've witnessed it when I was in Africa. It's a frightening thing. This was like some kind of variation of mob justice, but it wasn't justice. It was absolute. There was no reason. I don't know how the thing started. Maybe somebody said something. Maybe somebody just looked at someone the wrong way. It doesn't really matter. What happened was brutal, absolutely brutal. And this, thankfully, there was no fatalities, and thankfully, the young lad was able to, walk away from it. But that's luck, Nick. That was down to pure luck. That young boy essentially could have been killed. And the mainstream media have absolutely run a million miles from this. A million miles. I covered it, and various other people on YouTube covered it. Now, my video that I put up, and I really clipped it as much as I possibly could to take out all the things, the violent stuff, which I know YouTube doesn't like, and they still spiked it. I mean, no sooner did they put it up than they stuck me in the over 18s bin, which is, as you know, that's death to a video once you go in there. So the mainstream media ran a mile. Now, I did see a small piece today in the Irish Mirror, which barely covered it, and covered it in a kind of a slanted way, saying that there appeared to be some black youths involved. Appeared. It was very hard to find anybody else appearing. Anyway, and I think they only covered it, Nick, because they were shamed into covering it. They were embarrassed into covering it, because this story in Ireland was everywhere, on social media, on the mainstream media, not a peep. And I even made a point yesterday, which I don't normally do, but I did this on purpose, just for my own, just to see if am I the sane one here. I, in the course of my day, was meeting various people in various places, and, as you do, shooting the breeze. And I just brought up, oh, by the way, wasn't that terrible what happened to that young lad in Adamstown yesterday? They hadn't heard of it. They knew nothing about it, Nick. They didn't even know what I was talking about. Imagine that. A young lad set upon by a mob, beaten brutally to a pulp, could have been killed. And because it's the wrong narrative, nobody wants to know. And there's no charges pressed. And the Gardaí, the police here, aren't looking for anyone. They'll release a statement saying, because nobody had come to them complaining, well, therefore, nothing to do with them, really. Now, I mean, how is that even real? There could not be a more open and shut case, in my opinion, of a crime being committed. And yet, because of the way the ethnicities fall in this, and the groupings fall in this, white boy really getting set upon and vicious, nobody wants to know. The mainstream media don't want to know. The politicians don't want to know. And the police seemingly don't want to know.
And there's video evidence. They filmed it themselves. All the faces are on camera. The investigation would be easy to start. All the faces are there. This isn't a middle 2 o'clock in the morning behind a nightclub and we don't know what went on. It's all on video on social media. Now, I was involved in something very similar to that case. Nowhere near as violent. I used to run charities. I used to run youth clubs. And we had a football team at one of our youth clubs, and we used to go to this league and play other kids across Manchester. And there was one team from Moss Side, full of all black kids. And after about 3-4 games of this competition, I pulled us out and stopped going, because I said, they're violent nutcases. Every time we play a game of football against them, one of my players gets punched. We all get intimidated, and they're quick to go to violence. And I went, this is dangerous. We're not going anymore now. And about a month after we pulled out, it was in the local paper that the same team at the end of one of these friendly football matches was throwing rocks and stones, intimidating the other team that were on a coach, trying to leave on a minibus. And this isn't just because they were black, but this is what this team was like. The video, we talked about them. What was going through my mind while I was watching it was I was imagining every one of those kids was chanting in their heads, kill the farmer, kill the boar, kill the farmer, kill the boar, just like South Africa, because that's what that looked like. That looked like an African tribe hunting down white South Africans to kill them. It looked horrendous.
It was horrendous, Nick, and you saw the video, I saw the video, and as you say, they filmed it themselves. And there is, I think, a dynamic here with certain groups, and I know it's the same in England and Britain as it is here. Nothing's really going to happen. You know, they can kind of stretch things to a point where you and I would be in prison for 20 years. They know full well, because I would suspect many of those young black males were probably from the anchor baby generation, where we had in the late 90s into the 2000s, we had this dynamic, a flood of mostly Nigerian women arriving here 8 months pregnant, 9 months pregnant. I'd go straight to the maternity hospital, of course. We had to have a referendum to sort that problem out with the birthright citizenship, which we did. But what it left us with was a lot of these families, and those kids have grown up now. But they've grown up, I suspect, in the full knowledge that they can pretty much do whatever they want. They can commit petty crimes or even non-petty crimes and do all kinds of antisocial behaviour. And the police will look the other way. Even if they're picked up, they'll be let go. They won't have any criminal You know how this works as well as I do. And I'm sure your viewers also know how this works. Certain groups are nigh on untouchable. And they know there's going to be no repercussions. And as you rightly say, any and all of those perpetrators, the people who are really getting stuck in there, they're all on video. They could easily be identified and picked up. It could be already picked up, in custody, and charge sheets being prepared. And none of that has happened. And if that was a group of white kids or white people setting upon a black kid or an Indian kid, they would all now be in custody. Their faces would be splashed all over every publication, mainstream publication. Their addresses would be there. What they had for breakfast would be there. You know that as well as I do. And I'm for fairness in a society. I'm for equality and equalism in a society. And we are a long way from that right at this minute, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. I've got to a stage now where I say to myself when I see videos like that, and there's millions of them online, all from the UK, from America, across Western Europe, and I look at it and I say to myself now, I'm not even ashamed of saying this anymore now. I look at it and I go, I don't want to live with these people. They're not the same as me. You know, and this isn't a black or brown thing. That, you know, there's white Eastern European countries, Albanians. I don't want to live with Albanians either, because they're nearly all criminals and violent criminals. I don't want to live with these people. We've spent centuries in Western Europe eradicating this type of culture. You know, that's why we had capital punishment. That's why we had deportations to Australia. That's why we had mob justice killing people. Some innocent people were killed. It got rid of those violent genes. And then we had social pressure to ensure people like me and you behaved better. There was always crime. There's always going to be crime. We're not perfect people. But I look at these people, these new immigrants, these children of new immigrants, and I say now, I don't want to live with them. They're not the same as me. And it's like, what can we do about it? Because if your country fails, where do the Irish go? If England fails, where do the English go? Because we haven't got a second home like many of these new guests we have in our country. They've got another home they can flee to.
Absolutely. And if I could just slightly broaden the thing, because I think it's quite poignant about given what we're talking about, this incident. I've done a piece on it there just yesterday, and we, for the last week, Nick, and I know you tweeted something this morning which actually plays into this. We have been in the midst of a psyop, a government psyop, to do with the Indian community here. Now, we never had an Indian community. It just wasn't. I'm sure there was some people in hospitals or whatever, but there's no actual Indian presence. Now, in the last 2 years, they have been dishing out visas to people from India, like Smarties. Over 60,000 people from India have flooded in 2 years, legally, not illegally, legally. And as you know, we had a Prime Minister, a Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, who was a party of Indian heritage. His father was an Indian man. He made a number of trips there. So I fully suspect he had a bit of a part to play in that. But there was an attack on a gentleman in Tala, a suburb of Dublin, there about a week and a half ago. And it was like a George Floyd moment. The government media and the mainstream media seized on this because they know there's been growing, shall we say, discontent with Irish people. That, hold on a second now, we took in 120,000 Ukrainians. We've got people flooding in from Africa through the back door. Now the government has opened up another channel to 1.4 billion Indian people. And you can't not notice that, Nick, in a very small country of 5 million or so. And people were noticing it. And the government had a problem. People were noticing. So they took this incident. And now, since that, for the past week, and anybody living in Ireland at the moment will attest to this, they have flooded the airwaves relentlessly with stories about Irish people being racist towards Indian people. It's so blatant, Nick, of a psyop. I'm nearly at the point of saying, listen, could we not get a better standard of psyop? Because this is crap. You're not even trying. And as you know, because you tweeted out something, there has been as many, probably more instances, I would imagine, of Indian people committing crimes here to Irish people and against Irish people, sexual assaults, actual assaults, all kinds of misdemeanors. And there's not a word about that. But yet, as soon as anybody says something to an Indian person that's off colour, or they abuse them in some way, or give them a box or whatever, it's everywhere in the media. They're sending camera crews out to interview them. It's a deliberate thing, and we've been doing that for the past week. So my point here is that when they want to push a narrative that a certain group needs to be protected, they do it and can easily do it. But when an Irish boy gets racially, there's no question about it, it's a racist attack, beaten to a pulp, they're nowhere to be seen. Now, you can't tell me something isn't wrong there.
The Irish government are copying the playbook from America from across the Irish Sea in the UK. They're just copying the same playbook. And the playbook says, first of all, you call your citizens hurty words. You call them racist, homophobes, fascists. And that over the last 50, 60, 70 years has been enough to control people like me and you. The thought of being called a hurty word made us do the things and ignore the things we knew we shouldn't have ignored, but we ignored them because those hurty words were powerful. But those words are losing all power now because of it. And then if you look at let's look at two cases here. Let's look at George Floyd, and then let's look at Stephen Lawrence in the UK. So George Floyd was killed on the street. The officer was convicted. And even the court case was saying it was probably down to the drugs that it was in his body. Now, a month or two before he died, or might have been a year before, the same thing happened to a white guy in America. Police got him, put him on the floor, leaned on his neck, and he stopped breathing and killed him. I think he was called Tony Temper. Never even got in the press. Exactly the same as St. George Floyd. Then let's look at the UK. Stephen Lawrence. Stephen Lawrence was killed by so-called racists and got a bad service from the police. Everybody gets a bad service from the police in the UK, but the police then now have to flagellate themselves that they're institutionally racist. I think it was just before Stephen Lawrence was killed. 3 Pakistani Muslim men kidnapped a 15-year-old white youth off the street. Coincidentally, they were already under investigation for whatever, and the police had bugged their car. There was a bug in the car, so the police got all this on videotape. They drove him around for hours. They beat him. They were talking about how they're going to kill him. They picked him up because he was a white boy. Didn't even know him. They just wanted to kill a white boy, and then ended up setting him on fire and killing him. Hardly in the press. Hardly in the press. Now that's a racist killing. With audio going along. But we can't talk about that because that's not the right narrative. The right narrative is me and you are evil, me and you are Nazis, and those poor black and brown people or foreign people, they're the victims no matter what. And that's what we've been portraying since the Second World War. I've just wrote a book on it, which I've sent you about Anglophobia. And that's what this is. This is about always preferring someone else to your own people at your own detriment. And our societies are beginning to fall apart because of this. We're low trust societies now. Violence seems to be everywhere. We don't trust each other. We don't like each other. We feel that the whole country is falling apart. We're beginning to separate into our own little clans, our own little groups. We're looking at mob justice. We're looking at vigilantism. Nothing good's coming from this, but we've done it all to ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's if an Indian person or a black person commits a crime against an Irish person, then, well, that's just an individual, they're just a bad person. But if it happens to be an Irish native person does something, commits a crime or an offence against a black person or an Indian person, no, suddenly that's a societal problem. That's an Irish people as a whole problem. You see, it doesn't compute in my head because they're two totally different standards there by any metric. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't live in an Irish society anymore, Nick. I live in an anti-Irish society because Irish people now are at the back of every queue. We're the ones who get blamed for everything. Meanwhile, other people get a free pass. You tweeted that case this morning of the Indian gentleman who, of course, our Taoiseach, that's Deputy Prime Minister Simon Harris, was at pains to meet the Indian community yesterday, the leaders, to assure them that he was going to clamp down on the terrible Irish people who are being very mean to Indian people who've come here, fawning over them, tripping over to meet them, and use that as a pretext to curtail my rights and what I can say now. Me. But that's the game. That's the game they're playing. The Indian, the black communities, various other communities who are new to us, they want a slew of concessions, a slew of extra rights, a slew of extra protections that I don't have. And I don't think that's right.
And I don't blame them for wanting that because they look at Ireland, they look at the Irish government, they look at the Irish people and they go, you're all weak and pathetic. We're going to take what we want here because you are all weak and pathetic and you don't deserve to survive anymore as a country. And we're going to take over and we're going to make sure we're dominant and we're going to make sure we get the first bite of the cherry because look at yous. Look at what, look. And that's how they're looking at your country and my country. And I can't blame them for that because that's how we are. We're weak and pathetic because we don't even protect our own people. There was an article I tweeted today. Not Irish man, Indian man on a bus in Dublin sexually assaults a 14-year-old girl for 40 minutes on the bus. That poor girl, horrendous, gets to court, suspended sentence. You can now abuse Irish 14-year-old girls on public transport and you don't even go to jail. That's what I mean when I say we're weak and pathetic as a country.
Absolutely. And not so long ago, Nick, on the same vein, another Indian gentleman abducted a child, a young child, literally picked him up and walked off with him, abducted him. And only that an older child spotted this and ran after, stopped him. And his excuse was he'd had a few drinks and he wasn't used to it. So now I've had a few drinks on more than one occasion myself. It never entered my head. I think I'll just abduct a child now It's like, no, I'm not buying that nonsense for a second. What happened to him? He went to court, went through the system. No jail. He was politely asked, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd be ever so kind, would you leave the country and go back to India? Really? For kidnapping a young child? Now, heaven knows what he was going to do or intending to do, but that's not right, Nick. That's not right.
Let's look at this another way. Is there any way you can imagine that you would walk up to a child you don't know and touch that child, pick that child up, even if it was a threat, you're doing something friendly and nice? Would you ever go up to a strange child and pick that child up? Because unless that child was in mortal danger, I wouldn't touch it because that's our society. But if the child is about to fall off a cliff or run on the road, I would grab that child and I'll take the consequences later. But anything else, I would never pick up someone else's child if I didn't know that child and those people. Never in a million years, because that's creepy.
But we have many such cases, Nick, many. And I could list, I did actually look into it because I was researching the video about this PSYOP that's going on in Ireland at the moment. And the number of criminals popping up for various offences, a lot of them sexual, as you say, like that 14-year-old girl. No jail time. At best, a suspended sentence. No media coverage or minimal media coverage. No mention of any racial element to it. No mention. Of course, as I said, if it's an native Irish person, immediately the race card is out. Well, that must have been racial. So it's complete double standards. And as you say, that's why we are now moving from having been the highest trust societies probably in history to the low trust type society that you get in these places where these people have come from. They aren't adapting to us, Nick. Our society is adapting to them. And that's not good. We were sold a lie that these people will just come here and sure they'll be as English or as Irish as you or I in a few months, and life will go on just as before. And that was a lie we were sold, because it doesn't work that way. You saw that feral mob of African youths yesterday, and as you said, that's tribal. I guarantee you a lot of those chasing pack didn't know each other. They didn't know each other, but they just knew, oh, this is my tribe and we're all chasing this white kid. And when the excrement hits the fan, we all go to our own corner. It has ever been thus. There's nothing new under the sun here.
And that's exactly what our governments are trying to manage now. I think they all know they've messed up. I think they all know there's potential violence coming. I don't think it's potential. I think violence is coming, but they're thinking it's potential violence. And they're doing whatever they can. They're trying to demonize the white people of our countries to control their aggression. And they're trying to victimize or portray new guests as victims. But we're living in balkanized cities now where this is what's happening. And our governments are trying incompetently to keep a lid on it. But when you put a lid on a pressure cooker, it builds and builds and builds, and eventually the pressure cooker will explode. And I think that's what's going to happen in the next few years. We've already seen it. Southport, we've seen it now in the UK outside the migrant hotels. We've seen it in Ballymena. We've seen it in Dublin with the marches. It's on it. Mass violence is on its way, and we've only got ourselves to blame, and we've only got the governments of our countries to blame for this.
Absolutely. I did a video last week, and I you've talked about it, and you had Professor David Betts on, and I put out a heartfelt kind of just a monologue, basically, expressing my fears about conflict, incoming or possible conflict, civil war, civil unrest. And the response, I got a massive response. I was actually very surprised. And I would say a third or half of those comments were from the UK. Because people are very, very alive to this now. It's not a fringe thought, a fringe idea. Ordinary people are looking around and saying, listen, this can't hold. This powder keg can't just, it's not going to hold together. And a lot of, because a lot of the comments, and I read through them all, were very deeply thought out comments, not just a one line or a few words. People really were invested in this. So it's very much, I think, becoming part of ordinary people's concerns, fears. They might not express it to certain people at work or a family or whatever, but they're thinking it, Nick. They're thinking it.
They absolutely are. And I think the final line that's got them to that point was their children aren't safe. And that's when 99% of people will go, I've had enough now. They put up with everything. They put up with the LGBT crap. They put up with mass immigration. They put up with lower living standards. They put up with crime going up. They put up with everything. But now it's obvious your children aren't safe. And people now have gone, I've crossed the line now. This is it now. No more from me. And we'll see where this goes. Derek, I'm sure we're going to be talking again very soon. Because your country and my country, we're not changing anytime soon. It's only going to get worse.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me back on. Always great to chat to you and to your esteemed viewers. And look, we're living in very strange times, very dangerous and dark times, Nick. We both know that. And you and I watch the news constantly, so we're seeing this in real time. So yes, there will be more chats needed, because both of us, I think, want to try and pick a way through this, or at least offer solutions whenever or however we can.
Absolutely. Go in the description of this video, everybody. Find Derek's link. It'll be the top link. Click it, subscribe to his channel. You won't forget it. Derek, I'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Nick. See ya.